You hear it all the time, right? These absolutely wild, almost unbelievable price predictions for Bitcoin. But is there any real data behind them, or is it all just, hype? Well, in this explainer, we're going to dig in and break down the technicals, the trends, and the long-term forecasts that are pointing to some truly staggering numbers. I mean, just look at this. These are the kinds of figures some analysts are actually putting out there. We're talking a potential climb to $300,000 by 2030. They're also saying that most people might just miss the boat entirely. So the real question is this just wishful thinking? Or is there a logical path that could actually get us there? That's exactly what we're here to figure out. We're going to try and map out Bitcoin's potential journey, starting from right where it is now, all the way to the end of the decade, using the same analysis that's driving these big predictions. But, okay, before we get ahead of ourselves and start looking that far down the road, we have to understand where we are right now. Let's ground ourselves in today's market conditions, because that's the foundation that these massive predictions are being built on. So let's set our starting point at the end of 2025. Just imagine Bitcoin is trading right around the $88,000 mark. Now, that number by itself, it really doesn't tell the whole story. The real clues about what's coming next are kind of hidden just beneath the surface. And this is what's really interesting. Yeah, there might be short-term dips, but the price is holding strong above these really important trend lines. We're also seeing a steady stream of money flowing into the ETFs. And the big institutional players, they're quietly buying things up. But the crucial part is this. The market isn't euphoric, it's calm. And if you look back, historically, that's exactly the kind of environment where the next big move starts to build up steam.
Okay, so let's dive into those signals. We're going to decode some of the key technical indicators that analysts are pointing to as the real evidence that the market is coiling up for something pretty significant.
What we're seeing right now is something called a consolidation phase. The best way to think about it is like a spring being compressed. The market is just catching its breath, building up tension. And according to the analysis, this isn't a sign that things are topping out. No, this is the pressure building right before the next big pop upwards.
So, the key takeaway is that Bitcoin is trading in a very, very tight range. You've got a floor, or what they call support, at around $88,200, and a ceiling, or resistance, right at that big psychological $90,000 mark. Punching through that ceiling, that's the trigger that everybody is watching for.
And here's another little piece of the puzzle. There's an indicator called the MACD. Now, don't worry about the complicated name. It's basically just a tool to measure market momentum. And right now, it's still positive. To put it simply, that suggests the underlying trend, the strength of the market, is still pushing upwards. Even during this pause, the momentum is leaning bullish. Okay, so we've got the current conditions locked in. Now let's look ahead. How in the world do we get from today's consolidation phase to those massive long-term targets? Well, here's the potential roadmap, and we're going to start with the very near future. For the rest of this year, 2025, analysts are basically eyeing a range somewhere between $95,000 and $110,000. And the logic is pretty simple. If Bitcoin can decisively break and, more importantly, hold above that $90,000 resistance level we just talked about, then $100,000 becomes a magnet, just pulling the price toward it. So what's driving all this? It really comes down to three main things. First, the supply shock from the last halving is still playing out, which means less new Bitcoin is hitting the market every day. Second, that institutional buying just continues to be a steady, powerful force. And third, the whole narrative of Bitcoin as digital gold, a safe place to put your money, is only getting stronger. So this brings us to the next really big question. If we see all this momentum building toward the end of the year, could we seriously see a rally up to $120,000 as we roll into 2026? The analysis says, yes, it's possible, but, and this is a big but, it all hinges on one single condition. That $90,000 level is absolutely everything. If Bitcoin can stay above it, then the combination of new money flowing into ETFs in January, plus investors reinvesting their gains from December, well, that could be the rocket fuel needed for a push into that $120,000 to $125,000 zone. All right, now let's zoom all the way out. If that early 2026 target gets hit, the forecast just builds from there. This slide lays out the whole projected path. It's a steady, year-over-year climb. We're looking at an average around $125K in 2026, moving up to $150K in 2027. Then, the model projects a push towards $185K in 2028, then over $230,000 in 29, which eventually leads to that final target of $300,000 by 2030. Now, a projection like that isn't just someone pulling numbers out of a hat. It's based on some really solid fundamental principles. the unchangeable scarcity of only 21 million Bitcoin ever, the growing mainstream adoption by both regular people and big businesses, and the massive wave of institutional capital that honestly is still just getting started. Okay, I know those are some huge numbers, and it is totally natural to be a little skeptical. So let's run a quick reality check and tackle some of the most common questions that pop up whenever you see forecasts like these. And this is always the first one on everyone's mind, right? With all this volatility, is a major crash just inevitable? Well, the answer from the analysts is a bit nuanced. Will there be sharp, painful corrections along the way? Oh, absolutely. That's just part of Bitcoin's DNA. But a complete long-term collapse is seen as pretty unlikely. The growing institutional framework and mainstream adoption give it a much, much stronger foundation than it had in previous cycles. So what about the milestones along the way? For instance, will Bitcoin actually hit that $200,000 mark on its way up to 300? And yeah, according to that timeline we just looked at, that is a distinct possibility. The forecast actually pins that milestone somewhere in the 2028 to 2029 timeframe, which fits perfectly into that long-term upward trend. And we have to end this section with what is without a doubt the most important point of all. Please remember, this entire analysis is built on models and predictions. It is not a guarantee. The crypto market is incredibly volatile and unpredictable. This is absolutely not financial advice, and you should always, always do your own research before you make any decisions. So we've walked through the data, the technical signals, and the whole long-term vision, and that brings us to the final question, which is really for you. Are you ready for the next potential cycle, or